The more successful you become, the easier client acquisition should become as well. I mean, think about it. You have the proof, the testimonials, the client results and leads coming in. So by all appearances, this part of the business should be working. Now, for so many established founders, client acquisition still feels like the least predictable part of the business. It feels like you're piecing things together, testing new channels, trying different strategies, juggling lead sources, and wondering why none of it feels consistent. Because with everything you've built, you shouldn't still be questioning where your next best clients are coming from. Now, after 23 years in marketing and sales and working with over 500 established founders, I can tell you that this is exactly where so many successful founders actually find themselves. And the problem is almost never what they actually think it is, because it's not because they can't generate leads. It's because they've built ways to generate activity, but never actually built a system that creates buyers. And there's a difference between a selling process and a self-selling system, because one will get you leads. The other gets you buyers. And that difference comes down to a pattern that I call the buying autonomy code. So if you're done trying to piece things together, stay with me, because inside of this episode, I'm going to show you why so many businesses violate this code, how shifting this is actually going to allow you to create a self-selling system so client acquisition finally becomes the most predictable part of your business. Hey, and welcome back to the Business Real Talk, the show where we cut through the noise and get brutally honest about what it actually takes to grow a business in half the time. Now, I'm Echeverria, and I help established founders turn their expertise into a self-selling system that makes them the category leader in their market using the Netflix effect. Now, last week we touched on how to actually increase your conversions without adding more sales calls to your calendar. Now, this week, we're going to go one layer deeper, because before you can Now, this week, we're going to go one layer deeper, because before you can convert, you need the right people in your pipeline to begin with. And that's what starts with the buying autonomy code. Now, right now, you might be generating hundreds of leads a month. Now, a handful of them might be turning into real conversations. But by the end of the month, you're sitting there wondering why more clients aren't coming in. And you're trying to figure out what's actually broken. Is it the messaging? Is it the channel? Do you need better leads? Do you need a stronger offer? So you try something new, a new platform, you hire a new ad agency, you bolt on a new strategy, and you build a bigger list, because that's what you're told is the fix to having a predictable system for getting clients. You've been convinced that the problem is the quality of the lead. So you build your entire system around fixing that, building that list building funnel so that you can capture cheap leads at the top. And hey, maybe a few of those will convert eventually. Then there's the low ticket funnel, the book, the workshop, something that's built to create authority and trust, because maybe if they buy that, they'll eventually buy something bigger. And then there's the events, right? The huge productions, the time, the energy, the money funneled into one event that should do the trick so that you can warm people up over a week. And then if you're lucky, you or your team will spend hours on multiple calls, 10 follow-ups, a few discounts to try and walk people step by step towards a buying decision. And then you're wondering what the hell went wrong? Because sure, there's conversions, but nothing predictable enough to feel like you finally nailed it. So here's the deal. Every system you've been sold is built around one very severely broken idea: that your marketing is meant to turn an unready buyer into a ready one. I call it the Cinderella model, and you're the fairy godmother. Maybe if you wave the wand enough times, nurture them for long enough, touch them at enough points, then eventually the pumpkin becomes a carriage, and then the unready buyer becomes the perfect client. But in this case, when midnight hits, they disappear because the transformation was never real. You didn't attract a buyer, you manufactured one. And manufactured buyers don't stay. They don't pay full price without negotiating, and they don't come back. They're just there for a short time and a fun party. And the more you optimize that system, the one where the more leads you pour in, the more touch points you add, the more content you create, the more it's becoming dependent upon you being able to convince them, because it was never built to attract buyers. It was built to drag them there. And a system that's built to drag people to buy will always attract people who need to be dragged. So instead of building a system designed to turn unready buyers into ready ones, you need to build a system that attracts people who are already in a buying state and then sets up the conditions for them to buy on their own. No dragging, no convincing, no fairy godmother moment. They arrive already ready. Your system does the rest. That's why finally nailing a predictable client acquisition system is not about turning unready buyers into ready ones. It's about bringing in ready buyers and building your system to create buyer autonomy so that they're actually able to sell themselves on working with you. That is what I call the Buyer Autonomy Code. When you nail this, you create a self-selling system one where buyers enter your world and move autonomously through the buying process until they fully sold themselves. So what actually creates this self-selling system? Now it comes down to three things. And when all three of them are working together, the right people find you, they understand you, and they sell themselves on working with you before you've ever had a conversation with them. But if you miss even one of them, the system breaks down. Now, the first piece is what I call high intent messaging. Now, most businesses write messaging that kind of makes people think, and thinking is the enemy of buying. Here's what I mean. When someone reads your messaging and they have to figure out what you do, who it's for, or whether or not it's for them, you've already lost them. It's not because they weren't interested, it's because you made them work for it. That's what I call inferred messaging. It speaks to the why, the vision, the big transformation, and it tracks people who are curious, the browsers, the people who think that's interesting, but they keep on scrolling. Now, high intent messaging on the other side does something completely different. It speaks directly to the explicit desire that your buyer already knows that they have, not what they want eventually, what they're actively searching for right now. So let me show you what I mean. Think about a great doctor's office sign and how it works. A bad one might say helping patients live their best lives. Now, the best one is going to say same day appointments for back pain because the person who has back pain doesn't need to figure out if this is the right thing for them. They know instantly and they walk in. Now, think about it as well as like Google ads and how they work at their most basic level. Someone who's typing in emergency plumber near me and they find this plumber whose ad says fast, reliable plumbing services. They're going to lose to the one that says emergency plumber available 24/7 on site in 60 minutes. It's the same service, but one is speaking to what the buyer is feeling in that exact moment, and the other one is going to make them keep scrolling or keep searching. That's the difference between inferred and explicit language. One will make people dig, and the other is going to make them stop. Now, here's the question I want you to sit with. If someone landed on your content, on your page, on your profile right now, in 5 seconds, would they know exactly what you solve, who you solve it for, and why they should care? Not eventually, not after reading your about section, but in 5 seconds. Because your high intent buyer is making that decision in less time than that. So if the answer to that is not immediately obvious for them, they're gone. And this matters a lot because your messaging is what is going to actually determine the intent of every single person who enters your system, regardless of the platform, regardless of how much you spend on ads, regardless of how strong your offer is. Wrong messaging will bring in the wrong people. And no amount of nurturing, follow up, or extra touch points is going to turn them into the right ones. So here's how we actually build this together with our clients. We start with what we call demand research. This is where we identify the active demand triggers that are already present inside of your high intent buyer. So that's what they're actively searching for, the language that they're actively using, the specific problems that they're trying to solve right now. Because high intent buyers are not browsing, they're searching. So when your messaging speaks directly to what they're already searching for in their exact language at the exact moment that they're looking, it doesn't feel like marketing, it feels like an answer. So that's when your lead stops being a curious browser and becomes a buyer who knows exactly that they need you before they ever raise their hand. So once you have that, the second step of the process is what I call singular authority, because getting the right people to show up is only half the battle. Even when the right person finds you, if they can see other options, they will compare. And comparison is where buying decisions go to die. Think of it like this. Right now, someone finds you. They like what they see, and then they go and they open 3 more tabs. So they spend the next 3 hours reading about everyone else in your space, evaluating their credentials, reading reviews, watching other people's content. And somewhere in that process, that decision got harder, not easier. So momentum dies in the process. And that's where I need to think about it starts. That is what happens when you're positioned as a great option, because being a great option is one of the most expensive places to be in business. Great options are who get compared, who get negotiated, and eventually who lose to the person who followed up last or dropped their price first. Instead, singular authority creates a completely different experience. It's not about being better than everyone else. It's about your method making everything else feel irrelevant. Think about someone who gets diagnosed with a complex condition and is researching the treatment options that are available. So they find a doctor who's developed a specific protocol, a named approach, a method that addresses exactly what they're dealing with in a way that nothing else has. Now, suddenly, every other doctor becomes irrelevant. And not because the doctors aren't qualified, but because now they have a standard and everything else is now getting measured against that standard. So they're not comparing doctors anymore. They're asking one question: how do I get access to that one specific method? The doctor didn't win by being better. They won because they made everything else feel like it was a compromise. That is what a category leader does. They don't compete for the top spot in a crowded field. They create a new field entirely, and that field is the one where they are the only one. So think about Tony Robbins. There are thousands of motivational speakers, thousands of coaches, thousands of people who teach mindset and performance, but nobody asks, who's a good Tony Robbins alternative? Because Tony Robbins isn't the motivational speaker category in his buyer's mind. He is the category. His methods, his events, his language, they became the standard that everything else gets compared to. That is singular authority. Now, here's the question. When your ideal client finds you right now, does your method make everything else feel like a compromise? Or are they still opening other tabs? Because if they're still comparing, you're not positioned as a category leader, you're positioned as a contestant. And here's how we close that gap together with our clients. We use what we call our innovation gap methodology to actually identify the specific problem in your market that nobody else has named or solved in the way that you have. Now, that gap between what exists and what your high intent buyer actually needs is where we actually create this. When you find that gap and build your method around that, your buyer doesn't have a comparison point. There's nothing to weigh you against. So instead of why would I pick you over someone else, the question becomes, how do I get access to your method specifically? That is a completely different buyer, a completely different conversation, and your client acquisition starts to feel inevitable. Now, once you have that, then it becomes what the system does, right? Right now, you have the right people showing up. You have people seeing you as the only logical answer. Now, here is where most businesses will actually lose them. The system that they built to convert those buyers is actually slowing them down. Now, I need you to understand this. High intent buyers specifically, they don't have patience for complexity. They are not browsers. They're not curious. They've arrived ready to make this decision. So the moment that your system creates friction with too many steps, too much information, too many places they need to go, they're not going to push through. They leave. It's not because they changed their mind. It's because your system was not built for someone who was already ready to make decisions. Think about it like when you walk into IKEA, what happens when you're there without a list, right? You walk in for one thing and suddenly you're navigating this maze, right? Of fake living rooms, bedroom displays, kitchen showrooms, following this path that you didn't choose, picking up things that you didn't come for, and completely losing track of what you walked in for. Now, an hour later, you're eating meatballs and you still don't have the lamp that you got there for. That is what most client acquisition systems feel like they do to high intent buyers. A lead magnet here, a webinar there, a low ticket offer over there, and a 20-day email sequence with 2 discovery calls and multiple follow-ups. Every single touch point was added with a great intention to build more trust, more warmth, and more education. But what it actually does is it creates this maze. And high intent buyers don't do mazes. They take one look at that complexity and they leave because their time is valuable and your system just told them that this is going to be complicated. Now, think about instead how a really great museum is designed. You walk in, there's a very clear path. Every room is going to naturally lead to the next one. So every exhibit is going to build on what came before. You're not lost. You're not overwhelmed. You know exactly where you are and where you're going. So by the time you get to the end, you feel like you've experienced something complete, something that really makes sense, and something that's worth coming back for. That is what I call the treasure map system. There's no maze. There's no prize hidden somewhere inside of it. It's a very clear path with a clear destination where every single step is designed to do one thing: move the right buyer to a decision. And here's the psychology behind why this works. High intent buyers have already done most of the work on deciding before they ever find you. So they know that they have a problem. They know that they want a solution. They know that they've been thinking about this for a while. So what they're looking for when they find you isn't going to be more information, it's confirmation. So confirmation that you understand their problem, confirmation that your method solves that problem in a way that others have missed, and confirmation that working with you is the next obvious step. So every unnecessary touch point that you add between them and that confirmation, that piece of content, every extra step, every decision that they now have to make introduces doubt and where there wasn't any already. So I want you to understand that cognitive load slows the process down and actually deters buyers. So when we work together with our clients, we map out the fewest steps possible between a high intent buyer finding you and making a decision. So each step is designed around what I call mirror decision making. It's the psychology behind what people naturally go through in order to make decisions, meaning that it's going to reflect back exactly what the buyer is already thinking, already feeling, and already going through in order to make that decision. You're not educating them or convincing them, you're mirroring them. So when your system mirrors your buyer's decision process instead of interrupting it, they're not going to feel marketed to. They feel really understood. They feel like this was something that they came to on their own. And they don't feel like they need 20 touch points to say yes. They just need one clear pathway that confirms what they already know. That is the treasure map system. So when all three of these things are working together, your high intent messaging is going to bring in the right people. Your singular authority is going to make everyone else out there and every other solution out there irrelevant. And the treasure map system is going to remove every single friction point between them and a decision. So client acquisition stops being something you manage. It becomes something that runs. So you've already done the hard work of building something valuable. The system is what should be doing the hard work of selling it. So let's bring this together. Right now, most established founders are running a system that's built around a broken idea that your job is to turn unready buyers into ready ones. So you build the funnels, the nurture sequences, the low ticket offers. And when you work harder and harder to drag people across a finish line that they were never actually running towards, that is the Cinderella model. And it will always cost you more than it returns. Now, instead, the Buyer Autonomy Code is going to flip that over entirely. Instead of manufacturing buyers, you're going to attract them. So instead of dragging people to decisions, you're building the system that makes that decision inevitable. Now, all three of those pieces have to work together, starting with high intent messaging is how the right people find you and they already know that they need you. Singular authority is when they find you and nothing else makes sense. And the treasure map system is the path from finding you to saying yes is so clear, frictionless, and obvious that they end up selling themselves before you ever get involved. That is what a self-selling system actually looks like. And when you have a self-selling system in your business, you're going to stop attracting people who need to be convinced. You're going to attract people who arrive already convinced. And you stop spending hours on calls with people who are never ready. You start spending time with people who have already decided. And you stop piecing together client acquisition month after month because it starts to feel like the most predictable part of your business. Now, here's the thing. The Buyer Autonomy Code doesn't exist in isolation. It's the foundation behind the easiest method, the system that I use to help established founders turn their expertise into a self-selling innovation asset that makes them the category leader in their market. So here's how it works. Step one is winning the market. Your best clients are not out there browsing for options, right? We've already stated that. They're searching for the breakthrough, the thing that makes them stop and say, this is exactly what I've been looking for. So when you create your innovation asset, that's exactly what it does. It takes your methodology, the specific way you think, the way you diagnose, the way you solve problems, turns it into something tangible, something that the market can see, recognize, and choose. When your innovation asset is built correctly, you're no longer competing for attention. You're not fighting for positioning. You've created a category gap so specific that everything else feels like a compromise. That is singular authority. That is what we do in the first step of when we help our clients win the market. So that is how you stop competing and start leading. Now, once you've developed that, step two is the bingeable decision system. So think about Netflix. They don't give you 50 choices and hope that you find something. They give you one episode and the next one pulls up automatically. Before you know it, you've watched an entire season. That's exactly how your buyer should experience moving through your system. Now, the bingeable decision system is built around how buyers actually naturally make those decisions, not how we want them to. So every touch point in your series is going to mirror where they already are in their thinking, and it's going to build on the last. So by the time that they reach out to you, the decision is no longer feeling like a decision anymore. It's the obvious next step. No chasing, no convincing, and no marathon call sequences. Now, step three is the happy client machine, because the best client acquisition in the world means absolutely nothing if the clients that you bring in don't get results, they don't refer, or they don't come back. Now, the happy client machine is how you deliver results so consistently and predictably that your clients become your best marketing and sales team. They're raving fans who refer without being asked, who come back for the next thing, and who tell everyone that they know about you. That is the easiest method. So if you're listening to this and you want to see how we actually help our clients clients become the category leaders by turning their expertise into a self-selling system using the Netflix effect, I want to invite you to book what I call a growth optimization call. On that call, you and I, we're going to sit down, we're going to review what your positioning right now looks like. We're going to look at your entire client acquisition process, and I'm going to highlight for you where the gaps in that process are and how I can actually help you leverage the EasyS method to turn your expertise into a self-selling asset. So if you're ready to see how this actually applies to you, head on over to easyesleads.com/call. Now, if you are new here or you want to learn a little bit more about the full Netflix effect framework so that you can see how we actually build these self-selling systems, you can head on over to easyesleads.com right now to binge the series that breaks it all down. Now, my goal is that you've walked away from this episode being able to think differently about what it actually takes to create a predictable client acquisition system as an established founder. So if this has landed for you, I would love and appreciate it if you could take 1 minute out of your already busy day to rate, subscribe, and share this episode with another founder who is going through something similar so that we can support them and being able to turn their expertise into a self-selling system. But until next time, here's to keeping it real.